Now let's talk about something really cool in LightWave 11, which is called flocking. I'm going to jump over to the effects tools, and we don't even need any objects just to see how this works. It's a little strange to kind of wrap your head around, but if you're familiar with particle animation, it will help you because it's kind of a similar thing, but just different. So with that said, let's go over here. And in the effects tools, we've got our enable dynamics, which we're going to talk about next in the next couple of videos. Item properties, world properties, which we're going to talk about each of these, and those all will go for the new bullet plugin. And remove bodies, that's all for bullet. The dynamic bodies, rigid parts, static, kinematic, and everything else. But then down here is flocking, and that's the one we want, just one simple button. When we open that up, we got a nice little panel. And what you're going to do in here is really pretty simple, but you have to think about what you're doing. You have to generate something to flock. And in this case, again, think in terms of particles. You're going to generate essentially like an emitter. All right, so here's a generator. And what is it generating? Well, that depends on what we want to do. In this case, we're going to generate bats. But you can see the effect of this before you even put any objects in. So the generator type is a box. You can see here the generator shape, box, sphere, the count, okay? Now, we're talking about the count similar to the way we did an instance. How many on the X, Y, and Z, and what's the size? So maybe we can make these 8, and then the size will maybe go, 0.5, 0.5, 0.5, and just scale them down a little bit. All right, nothing's going to happen. If you hit the play button, nothing happens, generally because you have to calculate all motions. But even if you do that, nothing's still going to happen. It's just going to blow out like that, which in one way can be kind of good. But in this case, we want to actually set up something that we can follow, kind of like a flock of birds. And in order to do that, we want to go to Add New, and we want a goal. And a goal being, well, soccer field, football, a goal, something you need to reach. All right, so we add a goal. Where's the goal? Well, it's right here. You can see that little flag, and let's just pull it out there, just like that. And there is our goal. It's a flag. Let's get there. Hit Calculate All Motions. Give it a second, and you'll see the screen kind of pop. Now, this is one issue I have with this, is that you really don't know when the calculation's done. You know it won't. It's not. It's still. You know it's still working when you can't move the screen around, but there should be some sort of little progress window. Anyway, if we hit the play button, now you actually see that explosion of little particle generators gathering up towards that goal. And setting up flocking is really just that easy. It's kind of fun. All right, so what other types of flocks can we do? Well, let's go back to the flock itself, the generator, and let's take a look at the agents. There's a behavior preset right at the top, and we can say swarm. Calculate all motions, and there's our motion calculated at 0. Hit the play, and now we have this swarm that's just coming out of there. But again, they are all attracting to that goal. That looks really cool. Now let's say that swarm's a little too big for you. Go back to the generator, and let's bring these multiplications down to 2, 2, 2, or something like that. Calculate again, and now you've got a much smaller swarm. Although it looked much cooler with the bigger. So let's go in between. Let's do about 6. Calculate. Rewind and play. All right. So let's give this a little bit more room here. Let's take this director goal and move it all the way back down on the Z. Now, with those attracting to that, what else can we do? Well, come back here to the flock and go to the agents. And instead of the preset being swarm, there is just a flock itself for flocking. Calculate and then play. And we have this nice flock of birds. Now, really, I don't think you need to take these so literal. Here's a herd. And what the herd's going to do is keep it relatively flat on the ground. But don't take all of these so literal, because you might think that I need a herd for something, or I might need a flock or a swarm. But if one of those will be a good enough preset for you to begin working and making some variations, then use it. Don't just think of them only simply like a school of fish because it's labeled school. you can certainly use it for other things. You know, what about little puffs of dust? Little dandelions blowing in the wind, things like that. Okay. So those are all attracting. Looks really cool. Let's add just a few more frames, about 450, onto the end of our scene. All right, so we can come down, we can change the range. Now this range right here, if I go, let's say 0.2, for instance, and I calculate, now we've got a much smaller range of those particles, whereas they were blowing out before at 1.5. Okay, so we're going to set this back just to about 1. The viewing angle, if we go down here to 90, calculate, give it a second. We can change how that degree is set. We can avoid collisions, meters per second squared, cohesion, match velocity, acceleration. Let's pump it up to 8. Watch what happens. And this is what I always tell people. If you're not sure what some of the values do, just crank it up. Okay, so makes a little kind of, you can see each one of these kind of popping a little bit with that acceleration added. But what I found is that most of these work pretty well just on their own. And if you need a little variation at all, just make an adjustment to one of the parameters, hit calculate all motions, and then play it out.